I'm very honored to be here and very privileged to be here to deliver on behalf of the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator and also the Resident Coordinator, Mr. Edward Callan. Every time the humanitarians get asked to deliver a keynote speech, we give you numbers, and we've got quite a few numbers by way of a presentation. As Ndidi said, when you see Nigeria in the mix as a country with a humanitarian crisis, as an African, I'm from Ghana, I've spent quite a few years, 20 almost, in the international arena, delivering humanitarian assistance on different continents in crises that have ravaged our world, from Asia to the Middle East to Africa, as Musun said. But I never thought that I'll be in Nigeria, working in the northeast in 3 states with my team, delivering humanitarian assistance or coordinating humanitarian assistance. So I think I would go with her words, it cannot be, and we need to do something about it. So I'm grateful to be here today. The statistics are quite a few, and I think it's good to give the numbers. And when we talk about figures, people don't quite understand what we mean. But for every figure I put out there, put a face to the figure, a number. Put a child's face, put a woman's face, put a man's face, put an old person's face. Our grandfathers, our grandmothers, our children. Everyone is a human being, and the numbers are quite stark. The overview is quite, Alta, can we have the overview? The humanitarian situation. I'll give you an overview of the situation, the humanitarian response for 2019, the needs and the requirements, the humanitarian response for 2018, and what we collectively did. Now, when I say we, I mean international NGOs, United Nations, government, MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, ICRC, it's a huge collective. So I'm not standing here only on behalf of the United Nations, but I'm standing here on behalf of the humanitarian community in the 3 states, in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states. I'll talk about a few opportunities for the Africa Philanthropy Forum, and thank you again for this opportunity, Musu, and everybody who's been involved in this. The Nigeria Humanitarian Fund, very briefly, and a video by our United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Mrs. Amina Mohammed, who shot a video to promote the Nigeria Humanitarian Fund, which, of course, maybe you've heard about it. The theme is Nigeria for Nigerians on the Private Sector Initiative. The humanitarian situation in Borno, it's difficult to read this, so maybe you have to listen to me rather than look at the screen. The white on the orange is quite difficult to see. It's been 10 years, colleagues and friends. It's been 10 years since this started. The humanitarian crisis in Nigeria and Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. Every time we talk about the Northeast, it's 6 states, of course, Bauchi, Taraba, and Gombe. But on this, the statistics are about Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. So I'll focus on the Bay states. This is considered one of the most severe in the world today. In terms of numbers, 7.1 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance today. 7.1 million. 6.2 million are targeted by the international community, the INGOs, the United Nations, and our partners. Protection of civilians is an urgent priority. What do we mean by protection of civilians? We're talking about people affected by conflict. We're talking about women who've suffered untold horrors. We're talking about the dignity of a human being. Protection of civilians is an urgent priority, and grave violations have been reported. 27,000 people, 27,000 civilians have been killed in this conflict since it started 10 years ago. Thousands of women and children have suffered, as I said, untold horrors, rape, gender-based violence. This is quite rampant. Since 2018, 289 children, mainly girls, 289 children, compelled to carry personnel-borne IEDs, known as human bombs, to explode themselves, compelled to do that. And thousands of children recruited into the ranks of non-state armed actors. Today, 1.8 million people are internally displaced in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, with 80% at the epicenter of the crisis, Borno State. Over 200,000 new displacements have been reported in 2018 and 2019 due to insecurity and military operations. 200,000 people. How many are we in this room? 200? We're here in support of government. We're not in the lead, but we're here to support. So it's a collective effort. And everything we do, I like to emphasize that. It's a collective effort with the government of Borno State, with the government of Adamawa, the government of Yobe, and of course with the federal authorities. Food and security remain a problem. Food security and nutrition remains extremely fragile. Over 1 million children. The numbers, again, don't forget the numbers, put a face to every number. 1 million children aged 6 to 59 months are acutely malnourished. There was a photo on one of these slides that disturbed me immensely. And I said to my colleague Alta, are we going to put that in front of everybody? We changed it. The dignity of a human being for me is everything, but the photos are stark. We have some pretty grim pictures that depict 6 months to 59-month-old children who are acutely malnourished. There are 370,000 children who are severely malnourished. We call it SAM, severe acute malnutrition, and 700,000 with moderate acute malnutrition. Among children arriving from hard-to-reach areas, there are some areas we can't access because of insecurity. 41% are acutely malnourished, 24% severely malnourished. There are over 200,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women who are also acutely malnourished, 200,000. Now, on top of all of this, we have situations of vulnerability when it comes to high risk of disease outbreaks, as routine vaccinations in many areas have been interrupted for several years because of insecurity. 2/3 of health facilities damaged by the conflict and acute shortage of government health personnel. Many health workers, many teachers were killed in the conflict. Continuous influx of IDPs and returnees and camp overcrowding increased the risk of outbreaks, including cholera. The Adamawa state government just declared cholera in about 4 local government areas on Thursday last week. So this continues. And yet Adamawa has done a great job of closing down over 20 camps and returning people to their livelihoods. But the second the insecurity starts, people move back to the camps. Nobody wants to be in a camp. 1.7 million vulnerable women are of reproductive age and require health care and support. Over 50,000 live births could face complications with risk of maternal mortality and morbidity. Our language is special. Basically, 50,000 live births will not happen because of issues with health facilities. The physical and psychological well-being of children is a problem. In our language, when there's a protracted conflict setting, i.e., the conflict has raged on for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 7 years, 10 years. 7 years is a protracted crisis setting. This is a problem, and the children, imagine a 10-year-old, all they've seen is conflict. All they've seen is displacement. All they know is uncertainty. Some of these children have been forced, women, girls, sometimes boys, to have survival sex in exchange for food. Education represents a huge challenge, with 800,000 children out of school in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states, 50% of them girls. Over 800 teachers were killed in the conflict. And most of the time when I go out with my team and some of the humanitarians in this room today, when we're out there in the LGAs, the local government areas, personally I've been to Bama, I've been to Ran on the border of Cameroon and Nigeria, I've been to Polka. Every time you're out there and you see schools filled by internally displaced people, you're wondering who's going to go to school. In Bama, there were countless children. More than 50%, in fact 80% of this conflict, of the numbers I've given you, 80% are women and children. The former governor of Borno State would always say, Governor Shatima would always say, quote, a Fanti saying, I am Fanti, and I didn't know that. So when he said it, I was quite pleased. He would say that the Fantis in Ghana say, educate a man, you educate an individual. Educate a woman, you educate a community. And yet, 80% of those affected by conflict are women and children. Think about the statistics. At least 8,000 boys and girls recruited and abducted by non-state armed groups since the conflict started. Violence against women, children continues. I've raised that already. Excuse me. The continuous displacement is unsettling. Just think of a child who's just gone from one location, left their home, and gone to one location, and then because of the conflict, has left the location again, what we call multiple displacements. It's unsettling, it's painful, it's difficult. And this is Nigeria. Cannot be, should not be. A country with an economy the size of what was said earlier. Basically, the humanitarian needs are high. I'm not going to go through the statistics. We have a lot of documents that we can share. Let me come to the philanthropy and the private sector engagement. Again, very grateful to be here on behalf of the UN and our partners, the donor community, without whom most of what we do is impossible because they fund us significantly. Before I get into the partnerships, maybe I'll give you some statistics on what we're asking for. Over the last 5 years, since the humanitarian community set up a coordination structure, predominantly in Maiduguri, covering the Bay States. In 2017, we asked for $1.05 billion. We got $924 million from the donor community. International donors, US, UK, Norway, the Scandinavian countries, Germany, Belgium, and so on. In 2018, we asked for 1.05 billion, and we got in excess of almost 900 million, 877 million. And in 2019, for our 3-year strategy, we're asking for 1-year budgets. And we asked for $848 million, and so far, we're one of the highest funded appeals globally. There are over, I think, 28 or more, 28 or so global appeals in different countries. And Nigeria continues to be the largest funded, the best funded in Africa, and the 5th in the world. That shows donor commitment. But now we're asking in the NHF PSI private sector initiative, we're asking the Nigerian private sector, and they've been very kind to engage. They've been doing things on their own. Definitely, the private sector has been huge in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. But we're asking them to also join our platforms so that we can coordinate and give a holistic picture. The variety of partnership opportunities, and again, I cannot say it enough, so thank you very much for this opportunity. UN and NGOs with existing private relationships. There are many. UNICEF works with some of the partnerships around, some of the private sector companies around the room today, World Food Programme, and so on. So it's not new that the UN partners with the private sector in the different countries. Matchmaking, including the financial or in-kind bilateral contributions and engagement. This happens all the time. The platform for philanthropic private sector to coordinate within the humanitarian system. So Zura was asking me, so what does OCHA do? And I'm like, we coordinate. She's like, yeah, what does it mean? Her language is hilarious. And I said, okay, so we take everybody's work and we create the big picture, all these statistics, that's what coordination is about. We don't do food, we don't do water, we don't do shelter, but we advocate. We go around, the US is here, in the UK is here, some of the donors are here, and we give the holistic picture. This is what's happening. These are the gaps. These are the duplications. And we create a big picture. And we talk to military. So the coordinators, we do information and we do overviews. This is what we can bring to the private sector. Information, overview, partnerships. We enable partnerships in emergencies across Africa. We do it in other countries too. If you look at those countries and you compare it to Nigeria, no disrespect. I worked in Mogadishu in Somalia for 3 years, Kenya and Somalia. Somalia was a failed state, became a fragile state. Nigeria has a strong economy. And yet when you look at the statistics of the numbers, with malnutrition and others, Nigeria is ranked with Somalia. It's impossible, should not be. But this is where we are today. The Nigeria Humanitarian Fund was launched in 2018, with thanks to some of you around this room. Also, you were part of that launch in November. Thank you for your presence, and I think indeed as well you were there. Zoera and whoever else I can't see. The best thing when you're giving a presentation, don't wear your glasses so you don't know, you can't see anybody looking right back at you. It's brilliant. So I can't see people, so forgive me if I didn't mention your support. We leverage advocacy and innovative solutions of the private sector. Let's not be fooled, the private sector is doing a lot. Or we just wanted to bring a picture together and show a comprehensive. So that's our leverage. We're supporting this effort to support mobilization of resources, both cash and in kind. The person holding the, am I okay? Where are you? Can't see you. Yeah, I'm good? Okay. We support and mobilize both in kind and cash. So for example, if the private sector is building a school in location X in Borno State, and we know that the international community is trying to build a school in location X in Borno State, sometimes you've gone to locations and there's multiple issues going on. Our job is to try and break it up and say, why don't you go left and you go right? That's what we do. We ensure that the targets are based on needs. So what we call a principled approach. We count the people, we deliver assistance. No politics, no drama. And that's our contribution also. And of course, accountability and measurable results. So we can count every last dollar, every last figure, and share it with you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we'll end with a quote. On your screens, I'll read it for you. This is from Mrs. Owasika, the chairman of the First Bank of Nigeria Limited, the founding member of the NHFPSI. These are our people. This is our country, and this is our problem. We must be able to find solutions for our own people. All of the people in the IDP camps are our brothers, our sisters, and our children. And I'll add, our mothers and our fathers. Thank you.
Between the private and public sector to achieve real impact on the ground. Thanks to your vision and generosity, Nigerian businesses will be able to pool funds, resources, and ideas to provide life-saving assistance to the population of Northeast Nigeria. The Nigeria Humanitarian Fund has already allocated nearly $70 million in the last 18 months to meet the urgent life-saving needs of thousands of Nigerians. I welcome the fund's emphasis this year on assisting civilians, mainly women and children, who come from highly deprived areas and were displaced as a result of ongoing hostilities. We welcome the efforts of the Nigeria Humanitarian Fund, which have provided much-needed funds to deal with the congestion in existing camps and to treat hundreds of children with malnutrition. The fund also highlights the cross-cutting impact of humanitarian work in health by providing assistance to contain the cholera outbreak in the Northeast, considered to be the country's worst outbreak in the past 10 years. We at the United Nations are honored to partner with you in saving lives and in extending solutions and support to millions that are in need, and to build on the progress made by the government of Nigeria, by the international community, and by the Nigerian people themselves. At the same time, businesses should imbibe sustainable business practices that allow initiatives like this one to provide humanitarian support in an environmentally friendly and sustainable manner. Expectations of the voiceless are really high. We must continue to be relentless in providing for people, safety, opportunity, and dignity. I thank you for stepping up in our commitment to leave no one behind. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Edem. Some of this new crisis that we're facing across the country, and how much of it is linked to our inability to address the problems at source. And is there data that we can rely on for that? And then the second question is really trying to understand the balance, the sustainability of some of the interventions. I'm sure that Zuhaira has peppered you on some of those, provided some of those questions. In Nigeria, we use the term peppered. But the question around sustainability of some of the international interventions, because many of them seem like bandage solutions as opposed to sustainable solutions. Can you address how in your role, are trying to ensure that we drive towards sustainability?
Great, thank you. Thanks, Ndidi. I'll take the first one on the crises in the Northwest. For example, Zamfara, Sokoto. We've got humanitarian actors like the MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, ICRC, UN agencies, funds and programs are across the country, and they are looking into some of these issues. In terms of the overall picture that I gave you as OCHA, we're not intending to spread our wings in Nigeria. I am a strong believer of what I do, and I've been in OCHA for 15 years. And I can tell you that you don't want OCHA in Nigeria for too long. And my partners around the room will tell you. It took a long time for OCHA to come here, because when the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs comes to your country, it means there's a crisis. So you have the UN agencies, funds and programs who've been here for years. UNICEF has been here for a long time. United Nations, the Refugee Agency, UNHCR, has been here for a long time. WHO, World Health Organization, for a long time. And many of the UN agencies, FAO, and so on. But the coordinators, this platform is only in the Northeast for a reason. One, the Northeast crisis is extremely severe, and two, we mobilized international response to be able to support. There are crises in the Middle Belt also. The farmer herder crisis, Plateau State, Nasarawa, Benue. So when we had a recent visit by what we call the localization mission and Sherpas, United Nations, Denmark and IFRC, following the World Humanitarian Summit, there was complaints by NGOs, national NGOs, saying that the international community is only focused on the Northeast. And my plea to Nigerians, my plea to all of you, as the private sector initiative says, Nigeria for Nigerians, you can do this. Mobilize, you can. You don't need the international community to spread its wings. And I have my colleagues in the room, Ada, Alta, Charles, where are you? I can't see you, but I know you're here. Yeah, and whoever else is here from the community. We don't want to be here for too long. Nigeria can handle its business. It should. But yes, the statistics are there and we can share them. We had a conversation at the Humanitarian Country Team recently where we're looking at what do we do? Do we spread our wings? Do we go to Zamfara? Do we go to Sokoto? But the statistics are alarming. But if we start in Zamfara and Sokoto and Kaduna and Kano and Benue and Plateau State and Nasarawa, where does it end? A question back to you, all of us here in this audience. In terms of the sustainability, Ndidi, you hit the nail on the spot. Humanitarian action is to save lives today. We've spent I've been in Nigeria for a year. Since I've been here, we've mobilized, not because of me, because of the donors and the whole community, a lot of money has been mobilized. The funds that have been mobilized have gone to all the numbers we shared with you, 5.5 million, 1.8 million, millions of people's lives have been impacted. But when there's security, when there's stability, think about what $2 billion USD can do for development. I am a believer, after doing this for a long time, humanitarian action, you don't want to know the places that some of us have been to. I am a believer in development. That's the end result. But humanitarian action is the failure. Humanitarian action comes in when development has not worked, for whatever reason. We have what we call the Humanitarian Development Nexus. Humanitarian Development Nexus is the approach where you're bringing development partners closer to the table and mobilizing development and not just looking at humanitarian action in a very, very myopic way. So we are hoping, and we're working with our development partners. Some of the donors have also insisted that we need to make sure that we're working, linking things together. Our NGO friends, national and international, some of them do both activities, humanitarian and development. I ask you today, how many water tracking, trucking water systems do you want when you can build a well to sustain the community? But you can't build the well when there's no, there are also, I'm not a development expert at all, but what I've learned from my development partners is they look to 3 to 5 years, long-term approaches with governance, policies, and stability, security, and all sorts of things in place. So humanitarian action is easy. It's not easy to do, but we come in and we support, and it's a Band-Aid, and we save lives. But we are not the solution. We are a means to the end, but we're not the end. Thank you.